Well, this is it. The end of the original series. My bookmark for this book is a plane ticket stub from July 19th, 2007. And back in 2007, before we had Pottermore, and Cursed Child, and Fantastic Beasts, and Crimes of Grindelwald, and so on, it really did feel like the end, especially with an epilogue that seemed designed to forestall any notion of further sequels. How naive we were then. But this is the end of our class, so I do want to take a moment just to say thank you to you all for making this semester so much fun. I know that we may have completely ruined your favorite childhood series, but I had a nice time. But seriously though, I loved exploring the books with you all and hearing and reading all of your theories and ideas. So thank you. Okay, so what to even talk about in this video? Clearly, I've had to choose just a fraction of the possible topics. And given that I've held off until the final video, it's going to be Snape. So, let's get into it. You might expect me to discuss Snape's love for Lily and whether it redeems him, but honestly, the Snape-Lily ship is old news for most of you, and it's been rehashed for nearly 15 years in the fandom. So, I want to talk about something else that we learned from Snape's memories. It's a lot more basic, but offers some interesting context for Lily and Petunia. Okay, so let's go back to the second chapter of Half-Blood Prince, when Narcissa and Bellatrix visit Snape at his house. We've already talked about how that chapter codes Snape as poor, and what that might mean to old money, pure-blood families like the one that the Black Sisters come from. But I want to go a little deeper. The name of that chapter is Spinner's End, and the description of the town tells us that there's a disused mill and a polluted river. This suggests to me that this is an old textile industry mill town, of the sort that was common across the Midlands and northern England starting during the Industrial Revolution. So think of areas near Birmingham or Manchester. Now, in the 1960s and 1970s, when Snape was a child, those mills were rapidly shutting down as globalization shifted the textile industry away from the UK. And this caused massive unemployment and poverty for entire towns of working class people in those regions. I think it's a pretty good bet that Snape's abusive muggle father that we first see during Harry's occlumency lessons is intended to be one of those out-of-work mill workers. And these circumstances shape Snape's childhood as well as his view of the muggle world. All of this evidence is available to us in books 5 and 6. The new piece we get from Snape's memories in book 7, which is easily overlooked beside the much more dramatic revelation that he was in love with Lily, is simply that this old mill town was also where Lily and Petunia grew up. The Prince's Tale chapter even refers to the huge chimney dominating the landscape, just like in the Spinner's End chapter of Half-Blood Prince. And from there, we can start to make some inferences about their class background. Because up to this point, I think it's been fairly reasonable to assume that Lily came into the magical world from a similar background as Hermione. Two-parent, middle-class muggle family. There's only one point where I think we might, in retrospect, see some evidence that Lily and Petunia's family was working class. And that's Aunt Marge's visit in book 3. If we dig a little deeper than just Aunt Marge is mean, we might wonder why she makes such nasty assumptions about Harry's parents. She doesn't know they're magical, so she's not hating and dehumanizing them on that basis. But if we see Marge as this well-off, Thatcher-voting, screw-the-poor type, whose brother married a woman from a working-class background, then her bigoted mental picture of Petunia's sister and brother-in-law as drunken layabouts makes a bit more sense, as does Petunia's silence during this tirade. Petunia may have complicated feelings about Lily, but I think her silence is more about the power dynamic at play. She's ascended to the upper middle class, and that requires her, at least in this company, to disavow her loyalty to people who are being perceived as working class. If she wants to be part of the us, she can't be part of the them. So that's one way to read that scene, but I don't think we can do so definitively until we have this evidence from Snape that they're all from this old mill town. And I want to acknowledge here that it's possible that Lily and Petunia are from this town but aren't working class. Sure. It's possible their parents could have been teachers or doctors or something, but the odds are much better that Mr. and Mrs. Evans, or at least Mr. Evans, had a job related to the mill. Because that's how these sorts of industry-specific towns are. Most people specifically choose to live there because of the jobs associated with the mill, or the mine, or the factory. And it's often generational. And of course, if the mill or the mine or the factory shuts down, it's devastating to the whole community because just about everyone's job was tied to it. So even though Petunia told Lily that Snape lived down Spinner's End by the river, and the text tells us it was evident from her tone that she considered the address a poor recommendation, I think it's probably the case that by the time the mill closed and everyone, from foreman to secretary, machinist to cleaner, lost their jobs, Lily and Petunia's family was probably in a pretty similar boat to Snape's family economically, though probably minus the abuse. So what does all this mean? Well, to start, it means that Lily's Hogwarts letter was not just an invitation to join her people in the magical world, but also her ticket out of this town, and probably out of poverty. Being a witch doesn't guarantee economic success, but it takes Lily to a boarding school where she'll meet people and make friends with people of higher economic status, get an education that equips her for a relatively high-status job if she chooses, and eventually marry a wealthy man. Even if you exclude that last part, Lily's prospects dramatically improve the day she gets that letter. Petunia does not get a letter. Not only is she not magical, not only is she losing her sister, but she is not getting a magic ticket out. Lily is leaving her behind. Petunia is going to finish high school in this dead-end town. She's going to lose her parents at some point over the next 10 years in this dead-end town. Maybe she even spends her teen years and early 20s caretaking them while Lily's off at Hogwarts. The point is, there's no deus ex machina from poverty for Petunia. Instead, she has to catch the eye of Vernon Dursley, who in Harry and Dudley's babyhood is already the director of a company, suggesting that he's either a lot older than Petunia or is similarly in his mid-20s but inherited the company. Either way, Vernon's background is sufficiently well off to have included boarding school from the age of 11. So Petunia somehow meets Vernon and joins this world, assimilating into a totally new economic culture, just as Lily assimilated into the magical world, leaving everything of her old life behind. I think this puts a lot of things about Petunia into context. Her class striving, certainly, but also her deference to Vernon, her obsessive cleaning, her desire to shower Dudley with all the material possessions that she never had, and also, maybe, her terror of anything associated with her past turning up to embarrass her, or shatter the illusion she's created of having always belonged to this class. Do I think any of this excuses the way she treats Harry? No, of course not. But I think it offers some context. Knowing Lily's economic background also invites us to read her differently too, to think intersectionally about what it's like for a working-class, muggle-born witch to assimilate into Hogwarts and the magical world. We might think about how that affects her relationship with James and the Marauders, or about how much more exceptional she would have to be on Slughorn's radar, or Dumbledore's. And then finally, how it affects our reading of her relationship with Snape. Because if they come from not just the same place, but also the same economic background, the children of laid-off mill workers rapidly sinking into poverty, then Lily's choice to marry James, the rich pureblood, may feel to Snape like it felt to Petunia, like Lily leaving them behind. Alright, enough of that. I bet you didn't expect that I'd spend this last video talking about Petunia. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about this, another aspect of the memory that we see in the Prince's Tale chapter, is that Dumbledore really trusted Snape. Not just trusted him as much as he trusted the rest of the Order, but trusted him more than anybody else. Snape complained that Dumbledore trusted Harry more than he trusted Snape, but I think it's clear that Dumbledore gave Snape the most important information and the most sensitive information, even if it wasn't everything that there was to know. For example, Snape is the only one who knows that Dumbledore has a year to live, following the Horcrux Hallows Cursed Hand adventure. Granted, that's because Snape gave him the prognosis, but still, Dumbledore doesn't tell anybody else. Snape is also the only one who knows about Voldemort's plan to have Draco kill Dumbledore, and Dumbledore's counterplan to have Snape kill him instead. And crucially, Snape is the only one who knows that Harry is a Horcrux and must let Voldemort kill him. This last piece of information very nearly doesn't get delivered to Harry because Dumbledore played it so close to the vest. It's only luck that, 1, puts Harry in the right place to witness Snape's death, and 2, prompts Voldemort not to deliver an instant killing course, which would have prevented Harry from getting the memory from Snape. At least I assume you can't get memories from dead people. But then again, we didn't know you could harvest memory tears before the scene either. So possibly you could collect the blood of your defeated enemies and learn all of their secrets. Who knows? But anyway, so I've been thinking about why Dumbledore doesn't share this really essential bit of information about Harry being a Horcrux with at least one other person. If not Harry himself, because that might be too much for Harry to hear, or too much for Dumbledore to tell him, then some other adult who might be able to pass it along at the right time if Snape is unable to. And I think it might be the same reason that Dumbledore tells Harry not to tell anyone but Ron and Hermione about Horcruxes. Obviously, he doesn't want this information to get to Voldemort, so Dumbledore doesn't want it widely known, but there are trustworthy people in the Order, and there are magical methods of keeping secrets. But I think that Dumbledore doesn't want Harry to tell, say, Lupin about the Horcruxes because Lupin is a clever guy who might very well figure out that Harry, Parselmouth, and long-distance Voldemort vision sharer, is a Horcrux. And if any adult who has any sort of parental feeling toward Harry figures out that he's a Horcrux, they might try to prevent Harry from sacrificing himself. And that would derail the entire plan. So Dumbledore needs an adult who isn't going to do that. Enter Snape. Dumbledore seems to have done very little in the course of these books to persuade Snape that Harry isn't the reincarnation of his father, or even to stop Snape from bullying Harry in class. And I have to wonder if that was deliberate. I think Dumbledore put the pieces together back in book 2, if not earlier, and knew that one day Harry would have to do this, and he, Dumbledore, might not be around. If that's the case, then it may have been useful to have at his disposal a trusted person who would protect Harry, for his mother's sake, but never really grow attached, so that he could be the one to make sure that Harry marched to his death as required. To his credit, Snape's not really very happy about this plan, but he makes it clear that it's his love for Lily and not any affection for Harry that makes the idea of this particular child's death at Voldemort's hands so upsetting. Which at least is in keeping with the character we've seen all along, rather than some annoyingly out-of-character reveal. So Snape does his duty in his dying moments and gets Harry the information he needs to wrap this up and end Voldemort's reign of terror. Snape, like Dumbledore, dies without knowing if it'll work. But he trusts Dumbledore, and ultimately he trusts Harry, with these memories that not only instruct him in what he must do, but also reveal Snape's deepest and most vulnerable secret, which only Dumbledore knew. To me, the trust that these characters have in each other, and how essential that trust is to defeating Voldemort, is the most interesting part of the big Snape reveal. It's implied in the last 2 books that Snape's love for Lily is Dumbledore's ironclad reason for trusting that he is really on the side of the Order. But I would argue that it's his relationship with Dumbledore that ultimately defines Snape's adult life. Alright, I'm going to leave it there. There's so much more to discuss about these chapters, and I'm looking forward to our final discussion.